Okay, let's talk about graphs of square root and cube root. So this is from your practice worksheet 6.5, and I'm going to start with problem number 1. Problem number 1 says graph the square root function, then state the domain and range. So here I have f of x equals the square root of x minus 2, where minus 2 is not under the square root. So I have to follow my 3 steps, and the very first step is to find out what h and k is. So h and k is going to give me my x, y coordinate for my starting point. And if we think about off to the side here what the general equation is, we have y equals a times the nth root of x minus h plus k. So I have to identify the different parts of my root function. And my h and k, my h would be inside the square root or the root function, and then the k is outside. So inside the square root I have nothing, so I have a 0. And then outside I have negative 2, which is my k. So my starting point for this graph is 0, negative 2. 0, negative 2, put my point. Okay. Step 2. Step 2 is to get another point by finding out what a is. Well, a is the number multiplied in front of the radical symbol. Well, in this case, I have a 1 here, really, multiplying, so my a is 1. And I use that similarly to how I would use slope to get my second point. I start at my starting point, and I go up 1 over 1 and get my next point. Step 3 is to draw a curve. So I know this is a square root function, so I know it's going to look like a half of a parabola. And I'm going to start at my starting point, and then I'm going to go through the second point to create my curve. So that is how I do a square root function. So now let's take a look at a cube root function. Okay, so taking a look at the cube root function, we basically follow the same steps that we did for the square root function when graphing. The first thing we have to do is take a look at h and k. So if I take a look, h and k, my h would be inside the square root, or the cube root in this case, in the cube root, and with x, and there's nothing else added or subtracted to x. That means my h is 0. My k would be outside the root, added or subtracted to the back, and that means my k here is positive 1. For part 2, then, I need to get another point. So first of all, I'm going to plot this first, the h and k, 0, 1, so 0, 1, that gives me a point right there. And then for part 2, I need to figure out what my a is. Again, my a is the number multiplied in the front. In this case, we have a 1. So my a here is 1. So just like before, I need to create another point, but for cube root functions, I need to create 2 additional points, one to the right and one to the left. So I'm going to start with the point to the right. I'm going to go up 1 over 1, and then I'm going to go to the left. I have to go opposite, down 1 and to the left 1. To make the curve, I usually start at the starting point again, and I make a curve just like I would do for the square root function. So at the starting point through the second point. Then I go back to the starting point, and I'm going to make another curve, but now through the third point. So, your curves aren't going to be exact, but they should be pretty close, especially because we get those first 2 points. So step 3 was to draw the cube root curve. If you have any questions on your homework, don't hesitate to ask, and enjoy the rest.